Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy. And using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the deferred sales trust, is an amazing way for you to eliminate the need for the 1031 exchange, defer taxes on business, crypto, or other real estate so you can create and preserve more wealth. Hey, my name is Brett Swartz. I'm founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions, and I'll be your host today. Each episode, I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, and business minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. We're also streaming on expert CRE secrets as well. We appreciate everyone out there listening on YouTube. I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of the great state of North Carolina, where they say basketball is best played there. He was a former junior varsity on the Tar Heel team, which is pretty cool. We're going to geek out a little bit about that here, about basketball. But he's quickly become a expert in all things short-term rentals and building freedom through cash flowing assets. Please welcome to the show with me, Jeremy Worden. Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Brett. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, so I am a 26-year-old full-time short-term rental investor. My short-term rental story actually really kind of like many other folk took off during COVID. At the time, I was kind of furloughed from my job, or my salary was cut, whatever is a better terminology for that. But, times were tough and I had to figure out a way to build additional cash flow. And the initial way I got going in short-term rentals actually through boat rentals at a local lake in North Carolina. Prior to COVID, I was living in New York City. The world changed, went back to North Carolina, started a boat rental business while watching the Ozarks on television. For those of you guys who know the show, it's about the guy who makes businesses on a lake in the middle of Missouri. Thought, I'm going to start a boat rental business. It went really well. There was really high demand for boats. I also would work with a lot of homeowners of different lake houses who were renting out their properties to my boat renters, got into conversations with them, started helping them rent out their properties. So I started doing co-hosting, which is property management for Airbnb. Also started doing rental arbitrage, where you rent and re-rent somebody else's property. So kind of with like a low amount of cash entryway, was able to get into short-term rentals via Airbnb arbitrage and co-hosting. Time went by, saw how lucrative everything was, and started raising money to buy properties, because ultimately it's my goal. And I'm sure, Brett, I'm sure, as you know, in your experience, all the tax advantages and just long-term wealth advantages to real estate, but wanted to own the asset. So I've really tried to take my cash from boat rentals, from the different Airbnb strategies, and start buying real estate. So that's what I did. Kept my head down for a couple of years. Now I have 26 Airbnb listings that all together pull in, over $1 million. I still have my boat rental business, and I've actually started creating software that helps short-term rental investors underwrite their deals. So to be able to do quick pro forma financial analysis and get an idea of how a property can potentially cash flow as an Airbnb. So it's been a great ride, and happy to share more information on that.
Amazing, Jeremy. What a background, what a story, a way to be an innovative entrepreneur with real estate. Fantastic stuff. Before we dive into the secrets and the key to freedom with short-term rentals and all the stuff that you started to touch on in the intro here, I want to take one other step back, Jeremy. I believe we've all been given certain gifts, and these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing and help to others. I'm curious, what are those one or two strengths or gifts you believe you were given, and how does that help how you help and bless people today?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm definitely a doer. I think a lot of people suffer from analysis paralysis from what I see. They think they have a good opportunity in front of them, but they're afraid to pull the trigger. And I'm maybe a little bit too trigger happy, for better or for worse. So I'd say I'm blessed with, if I have an idea, I act on it.
Fantastic. So you punch fear in the face, you take action, and you don't let it, paralyze you. I love it. So let's dive right into the secret. What is the number one secret to key to freedom with short-term rentals?
Yeah, so the thing that's really unique about short-term rentals as compared to a lot, real estate investing as a whole, or just like many of the different ways to make a side income. If you're potentially looking to quit your job and want you want that cash flow that's going to be at or higher than maybe what your job was. It doesn't take a lot with short-term rentals. Like if you have a couple really high performing properties, it's easy, or relatively easy to get to that, five, six, $7,000 a month cash flow range. Like you can do that with maybe one or two properties. Whereas with long-term rentals, it's really, really challenging, especially in today's climate with home prices where they are, with interest rates where they are. It's just very difficult to really cash flow. Whereas short-term rentals, if you do it right, and I want to caveat it with like, you got to do it right. There's definitely a right way of doing things and a wrong way of doing things. And, for me, through trial and tribulation, I've learned the right way to do things. But I also, I work with others and help show them the right way of doing things. But if you do things the right way, you find the right property, and again, you're trying to really supplement or take over your W-2 job. Like short-term rentals is the way for that. At least I haven't seen anything else that's better and quicker.
Fantastic. So key is making sure you're doing it right, and if you do it right, you can get that quick cash flow, and that and even just superior cash flow. Sounds like it's the number one secret there. So I guess it leads into the next question. What's the number one secret to doing it right?
Yeah, so being really, really good. So it's definitely a whole process. It's an A to Z. At the first step, you got to be able to identify what I call a winner, like a property that can just be a potential home run. One that's going to outperform and do thousands more than the other ones around it. So there's a variety of quantitative and qualitative ways to gauge that. The software I use, BNB Calc that I built, it helps you quickly run the numbers. So be able to gauge if a property is potentially a winner or not a winner. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Is just identifying. There's data providers out there, but even the data providers, like the thing with short-term rentals is it's not an exact science. Thing with long-term rentals is a lot of times you can have a really, really good idea of what a property is going to rent for on a long-term monthly basis, especially if you're in a city with a lot of different houses or apartments that are similar. Short-term rentals, like there's huge variability. Like I can buy a house and Brett, you could buy a house and we might buy the same exact house and you might do $25,000 better than me. I'll say you probably won't. It'll probably be the other way around at this point. But my point being is like, there's just a lot of variability. And when there's a lot of variability, there's a lot of opportunity. The caveat being you have to do things the right way. So, underwriting it, knowing what the amenities you need in the property are that are going to allow you to beat out the competition. Because ultimately that's what it is. If someone's going to Airbnb, they're looking between three houses. Why are they picking, my house versus Brett's? Or Brett's house has a heated pool where mine just has a pool. Well, then they're going to go with Brett's. So did that heated pool cost, that much money? No, it was $5,000. If you're going to spend $5,000 and get $20,000 more in annual bookings, it's a no-brainer. So it's just being able to identify what those key amenities are that are going to allow you to outperform, and then creating the property and creating the experience that's going to satisfy the client's avatar that you're looking for. So that's, setting up the property the right way, finding the right property, and then it's managing. You got to make sure that you're very attentive. It's a hospitality business. That's different than long-term rentals. It's more akin to a hotel in the sense that you need guests who love staying there. You need 5-star reviews. You need to know how to price your property. You need to know how to market it. You need to know how to, have your local handyman, your local cleaners synced onto your system. So, it's not like you have to go there every day and clean it and take care of it. So it's just a whole process from A to Z, but it starts with being able to identify and underwrite properties.
Excellent. Okay, so identify, underwrite properties, make sure you're choosing the winners, and make sure you have the process and systems in place. You're running a business. It's like a hotel business, and every little detail matters. And okay, so what is the next, I guess, key to success as it pertains to maybe even just certain areas that are, either restricting Airbnb or they're, putting making more and more barriers to entry there? What's been, maybe your plan there if something's been changed where you're no longer allowed to do Airbnb anymore? Walk us through some of those, potential risks and how you've mitigated those.
Yeah, so everybody talks about in short-term rentals the regulations, like regulations. What if the place gets regulated? Are there already regulations? And what I have found is like I look for tricks for supercharged demand. And to be honest, the easiest trick is regulations. And I mean that in twofold. One fold, like the obvious one of, all right, let's say, for example, let's say Asheville, North Carolina is extremely regulated, which it is. I actually have friends with short-term rentals in Asheville, but they have to be extremely creative on how they do it. So in a sense, because they have to be extremely creative and they're able to do it, they're able to earn a premium because other people aren't doing it. But also saying, we have two properties right outside of Asheville. So whereas Asheville, has strict rules, if you buy right outside, you're going to have, you're not competing with a bunch of Airbnbs in the city itself. So that's an example of using, short-term rental regulations to your advantage. The second thing is like, let's say there's like a news report. Let's say I have a property in a town and a news article comes out that town is thinking about doing short-term rental regulations, or they're already doing it. Or maybe they're going to do it, I'm zoned a certain zoning, which is okay, whereas other properties are in zonings where the city does not permit it. Well, now people aren't going to enter that city. People go online, they research, they Google, and they see that city may have short-term rental regulations. Bang, you've just built yourself a moat. You're not, and people talk about oversaturation. That's honestly the best way to protect about oversaturation is, have your local news source come out and say that your town restrict short-term rentals. And a lot of times, there's a difference between regulations on the books and what's actually enforced. I see that a city says they have regulations, but maybe it's getting challenged in court. Maybe something's going on where they're just not enforcing it at all. And that also gives opportunity. So in short, it's like, you can use regulations as one of the tricks to find supercharged demand. Obviously, be careful though. Be careful.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it makes sense. So it's not cut and dry all the time with the regulations, and also you can maybe use it as a way to know that it's going to be limiting, or they might grandfather you in. I know in California there's places where they're like, okay, no more Airbnbs, right? Or you got to get the permit, and the permits are really hard to get. But if you've already have it and you're already in it, it's like that's great. Now you can probably increase the price, which is it's funny because like you just affordable housing or even multifamily investments. The more regulation and the more restrictions, the worse it gets for affordable housing, because it's harder to build, it's more expensive to build, it takes more time to build, which means it's going to increase the cost, decrease the affordability. So I got it. Okay, so maybe give us an example, Jeremy, on a couple deals, right, that you're doing, or maybe a creative way that you're doing, and then how you can help people who are maybe looking to get into the business.
Yeah, so I've had to be creative in a multitude of ways. One of them being when I started in short-term rentals, I was 23 years old. I did not have a lot of money. I did not have financing. I tried to get pre-approvals from banks, and in a way, they kind of laughed at me. Like I hadn't even had a credit card. I only got a credit card when I was 21, so I didn't have a long credit history. So I've had to be creative in the sense where I've had to, use multiple types of financing. So I'd have to do, DSCR commercial loans. I've had to leverage other people's financing and partnerships that way. I've had to be creative in the sense where every dollar I've put into a deal has needed to make me as much money as possible, because I've wanted to grow extremely fast. And if I'm tying my capital up in a place that's not cash flowing, how am I going to reinvest? So I've had to be extremely diligent and also just execute incredibly well on every deal I've done. And I've also had to change geographies. I told you I started on a lake in North Carolina, where in 2020, the numbers were really good. You could buy a property there. Our first houses we got for 400, 450K, 585K that could, make over $100,000, like, up to 120, 130K, which if you do that math ends up, cash flowing you 40, 50K a year, like pretty good amounts. But then the home prices on, there's no inventory on that lake today. Or those same houses we bought, maybe 4, 5, 600K are now $1 million, which is obviously great and, has put equity in our pocket, but I've needed cash flow to scale. So I had to change course. I invested in Florida. We bought 2 properties in Florida. Kind of the same thing happened there. Home prices got too high where the numbers started getting a lot tighter. I've invested in the Blue Ridge Smoky Mountains. In a way, same things kind of happened there. But I mean, I'm under contract on a house right now. So, and we bought one back in November. So like, I'm still finding properties. And it's
Well,
more
dive into
about
that house right there. Like, I'm just curious, like, what are you seeing on that house? What did you like about it? Because, market deals in this marketplace are harder to find. So maybe give us the metrics there.
Yeah, so what I've honestly kind of done, like my strategy. So initially I started like lake houses, things that were naturally scarce, like a lake house. They're not building new lakes, like beach houses or houses near the beach in Florida. That's kind of like some natural scarcity there. And then mountain houses, you have a good mountain view. Those aren't things that can be easily recreated. But now what I've kind of tried to do is like take those experiences you get in like that beach house in Florida and like bring it to like middle America, like bring it to places where like those experiences don't already exist. So the house I'm under contract in right now is in a mid-sized city. And like, I don't want to say the specific names of cities because it's like, that's not the point. Like that's, it's not the point. It's a medium-sized city in North Carolina. I was also looking in other states too, in similar medium-sized cities, where this house, I'm going to have a house with a heated pool. I'm going to put in a putt-putt, a putt-putt range. I'm going to have game rooms. Like, I'm going to just take those like traditional vacation markets, like the things that people are doing out there, and I'm going to bring it where nobody else is doing that. And that's kind of my new strategy is like go places where there's less competition and where you can pull bits and pieces from like, the Scottsdale, Arizonas, the Kissimmee, Florida is like the places where there's so much competition where people are going bonkers on the amenities and experiences they're providing. And I'm moving that to middle America.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So taking what works and going to places that it's not as much competition, supply and demand, that makes sense to me. What else? What other questions, or how do you help people? Besides, by the way, you can go to bnbcalc.com. That's bnbcalc.com to check out all of Jeremy's amazing tools that you can use. Analyze Airbnb profitability in 20 seconds or less. B&B Calc lets you analyze any property Airbnb's potential, helping you find winners quickly. So besides B&B Calc, or add to that, Jeremy, how do you help people build wealth with short-term rentals?
Yeah, so B&B Calc's really the tip of the iceberg. It is the best tool for running. People say, "Oh, it's harder now. It's harder now to find deals." It just means you have to run the numbers on more properties. You need to have to analyze more properties. So B&B Calc, best tool used by tons of the best, not only investors but also brokers in the space who are finding deals for their clients. But to go above that, so that's thousands of people are using that. But in terms of actually, like I said, like that strategy I just had, we're identifying a unique property that is going to uniquely, be uniquely situated to outperform. I work with a lesser number of folk in my mentorship and mastermind program where I help them one-on-one, find home runs. I help folk do it for either buying or also, how to start their arbitrage business or co-hosting business, whatever it might be. Like any of the success I've had, growing to a 7-figure business in 3 years, like I can lend my expertise and help others do the same.
That's awesome. That makes sense. So coaching to make sure they're hitting home runs where they're located or where they're doing, and then using B&B Calc to just run the numbers, analyze the numbers. By the way, you mentioned the other deal before. What's the average sales price now, and what are the average, either gross rents that you're looking to achieve and NOI? Where are your metrics when it comes to that? Do you have a kind of a feel for that?
Yeah. So, and one of the things that's different about short-term rentals versus long-term rentals is long-term rentals, you're going to probably use a cap rate as like your underwriting criteria and your net operating income. Whereas short-term rentals, a lot of times investors look at cash flow and cash on cash return as the big metrics. But like just a general rule of thumb, and this is kind of what I employ myself, but also what a lot of investors do as well, is if a property is going to cost, like for example, or a property is going to be $500K to purchase, I'm going to want it to pull in revenue of at least $100,000. That's really, really high level napkin math, but that's generally about the rule. I want a 20%, 20% revenue to purchase price ratio.
Okay, good. And then what would it be for what is your typical expense ratio, right? Is it 50%? Is it 40%? Is it 30%? How much in general is per revenue? I know for apartment buildings it's about 45% is a good rule of thumb. If you're bringing in 100,000, you're probably going to pay about $45,000 of expenses for property management, taxes, insurance, all of those things, repairs and maintenance. But what's your general rule of thumb for that?
Yeah, so my OpEx ratio across my portfolio is probably closer to 30% on average. We have some properties where it's down into like the lower 20s for, I would say, like our real home runs. And then, up into like the mid 30s.
Good. And then as far as like actual like property management, I mean, sometimes that probably is the biggest headache for people, right? They're like, oh gosh, I didn't realize that I had to put all these time, system, energy management. Like, how are you streamline the property managed to make it really effective? And so you actually get this freedom that you're talking about here, the key to freedom, right? The time and energy freedom.
Yeah, so I have a property management company that I built out. So I manage my own properties or the ones that I buy on behalf of myself or I buy on behalf of investors. My management company manages some properties for external homeowners. And I've built, the systems and operations within that property management company to be where I effectively can maybe, work a couple hours a week on the properties. So I have virtual assistants who are in charge of guest communication, ordering supplies, handling the calendars with our cleaning team, dealing with, any air recovery situations or insurance, through Airbnb claims, pretty much anything on a day-to-day basis for the houses is like 98% managed by our virtual assistants.
That's
So
nice.
that's one of the great things about short-term rentals is, you can manage the business from across the world, or you can have a team of people across the world managing the business.
Fantastic. By the way, you can learn more about Jeremy Worden by going to bnbcalc.com. That's bnbcalc.com. Jeremy, you ready for the capital gains tax round?
Oh, let's do it. I'm
All right. What
excited.
would you say your biggest frustration is when it comes to the 1031 exchange?
Well, I've never sold anything, so my biggest frustration is that I haven't had the chance to do a 1031 exchange yet.
And so I'm curious, when would you think you might sell? You mentioned you bought some of these houses and they go up in value. At what point are you like, okay, my ROE, my rent is still 100K, but the house is worth $1 million now. At what point do you actually sell and maybe try to buy like 3 more properties that are lower price and do Airbnb with them?
Yeah, so we're actually talking. So I have 2 partners in my Florida properties, and the 2 houses we have there, and essentially the city is kind of on a vendetta against the Airbnb owners, and we've gotten a pink sheet on our door saying we're out of compliance with whatever rules they have. We're part of like a lawsuit against the city, or actually, sorry, I can't say anything like that. But we're exploring options to see how we could, mutually beneficially come to terms with, city on what's going on. And, it got us thinking, like, what should we sell, or should we sell it? Or the market's gone up so much there, like it's probably appreciated 60% in the last like 4 years. And then we bought in, I don't know, halfway into that kind of bull run, so to speak. So yeah, we've been talking about that, but we just kind of look at our interest rate and like what our monthly payment is, and we're like, I don't know, it's tough. Like it's tough to sell this.
Yeah, yeah, it's a time to harvest and it's a time to keep going. But yeah, and if when you do come into that, right, your frustration might be, hey, I don't want to buy $1 million Airbnb property, wherever the value is. I want to buy 3 more at 300,000. I want to do it at any time too. I want to do optimal timing. You can learn about how to do that without having to use a 1031 exchange by going to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. It's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. By the way, it also works for businesses, cryptocurrency, stock, private or public. And we help people across the country do that. Go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That being said, Jeremy Worden, are you ready for the lightning round?
I'm ready. And just out of curiosity, so you help folk do 1031 exchanges, and it doesn't only have to be for real estate. Just so I understand that.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm saying is we help people. We grew up in the real estate industry. I did, my partners and everybody, and doing lots of 1031 exchanges. But we learned that 1031 is like Blockbuster in that it's very restrictive. It's time restricted. It's like kind restricted. It's debt replacement restricted, and it only works for investment property. Whereas we have something called a deferred sales trust, which is like Netflix. It works for any asset of any kind. It works for, it's great for entrepreneurs and business people who want to go from real estate into business, or businesses into real estate, or crypto into real estate, defer the tax and keep growing wealth we call it optimal way. So yeah, capitalgainstaxsolutions.com is what you can learn all about that.
Beautiful. Check it
Cool.
out.
All right. So let's dive right into the lightning round. So Jeremy, knowing what you know now, if you could go back to your 16-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget to make sure to tell yourself to do?
I'd say get started earlier.
Number two, what is the number one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
I always get asked whenever I do a podcast. I always get asked the booked question, which I feel like everybody goes Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's probably like when I listen to podcasts, what I hear everybody say. But to be frank, I don't even know if I've read a book in the last year, like start to finish.
What's your number one, like, either podcast or YouTube channel that you really like?
That's a good question too. Pod or YouTube channel. I did like Robuilt a lot during COVID. He's a short-term rental or Airbnb unique experience YouTuber. So that was what I definitely watched a lot of that while I started scaling my short-term rental portfolio. But now at this point, I'm trying to create more social media and YouTube content versus kind of watch it as much.
Nice. Being from Carolina, is it the Tar Heels or is it the Dukies?
Oh my goodness! Oh, I can't even. I'm offended you'd even ask. Do I look like a Dookie to you? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, Carolina all the way. Go Heels. I played for Hubert Davis on the Tar Heels. Gotta give my love where it's due.
Tell a little bit people more about that. We were talking about it before the show, right? And I mentioned we talk about it. So you played hoops in college. Tell them about it. Tell them who was the coach of that team at one point.
Yeah, so UNC's kind of unique in the sense where it still has a junior varsity basketball program for its D1 basketball team. There isn't, at least to my knowledge, I don't know of another D1 program that has a junior varsity squad. And it has a ton of history. If you guys know Carolina, Dean Smith was the head coach for a while. Roy Williams, who was also the head coach, had been the junior varsity coach. Hubert Davis was my junior varsity coach, and he is now the head coach from the team. So there's just a lot of, you're training the walk-ons, which is great. Or, my teammates walk on. Unfortunately, I did not walk on, and that kind of probably is why I ended up going down a little bit more entrepreneurial route. When basketball didn't work for me, I was like, I got to do something else cool. So, incredible experience, and you got definitely UNC basketball. Was a blessing, and something that had really added to my personal development and growth.
That's amazing, Jeremy. Thanks so much. Second to last question: what's your number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
I think leading by example. Showing your commitment, determination, your work ethic. Something. I mean, I have teams now, domestically as well as internationally, and just definitely leading by example and showing that I care and that I'm passionate, and that makes others follow suit.
Awesome. This last question: after all your success, helping all the people you've helped, building the wealth you have at such a young age, how do you stay centered in your values, and how do you stay encouraged to charge forward to reach new heights?
Yes, I mean, this is something that I try to tell people who I see, going through a lot of, relative success or going through highs, but you just can't let your highs be too high and let your lows be low. I'm not going to say every day is all sunshine and rainbows. There's definitely a lot of things that go wrong in a short-term rental business. It's real physical, it's a hospitality business. You're dealing with real actual people, and people do dumb stuff, just to be frank. And you got to deal with that. But just don't let your things are going to be good, and when they are, you can't let your head get too big. And when things are bad, you can't curl up in a ball and sleep all day. So just kind of try to stay even keeled.
Amazing. Jeremy, I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom with us on all things Airbnb properties. I want to encourage you to keep using your gifts and talents of just taking action and punching fear in the face and making things happen. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, would you mind one last time, what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, check me out on social media at Jeremy Worden, first name, last name. You can look me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Not as much on Twitter as I'd like to be. That's on my priority sheet. And check out our software, B&B Calc, and reach out to me. Let me know. I'd love to help you out.
Cool. Thanks, Jeremy, for being on the show. Also, thank your listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. Also, stream an expert CRE Secrets podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with the 1031 exchange or figuring out ways to exit highly appreciated assets and being trapped by short time frames. If you want to learn more how to eliminate that forever, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Also, check out the new book we just released. It's called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. We do have Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank in the book. as well as some other really smart multifamily investors and financial planners. It hit #1 bestseller as well. It's pretty cool. We're excited about that in the real estate and wealth category. So check that out, Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. It's on Amazon right now, and or just go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to get your exit plan going. Appreciate everyone listening. We will